Hey, what's up, players? Time for another video in our series, Pop, another server drop. Today we're going to be tackling RootMe from TryHackMe's website. And this one's got a lot of cool different things in it. It's got some privilege escalation, it's got your basic scanning, some dir busting, all kinds of goodies and stuff of that nature. If you're new to the series, basically with this series I go through a variety of what they call capture the flags or war games to teach you concepts in cybersecurity. It's a little bit different than just your normal printed walkthrough that you may find online. Those ones, and as good as they are, they'll go through and they'll kind of blast through with a bunch of different commands and things that that particular person did to complete the challenge. In my opinion, though, to learn it a little bit better, it's better to kind of go ahead and know the methodology behind it. It's better to know if you're doing some certain commands, why we're doing those commands, why we're using particular switches to those commands. So in this series, I tried to tackle different CTFs, take a little bit more time with it, and kind of explain what it's doing and why we're doing it this way and the methodology behind it. And again, these are not completely indicative of what you would find in the real world because, like I said, these are purposely vulnerable machines, but it does teach concepts to practice as far as your methodology, as far as scanning, as far as things like directory bust and those sort of things. So it's a great tool to help you learn. In my opinion, from teaching so many years, around 12 years or so of teaching like the certified ethical hacking class, things like that, I found the best way is to visually teach and to actually teach by example, other than just, hey, here's some books, read this, remember the commands, and then repeat them. You know what I mean? Because you definitely don't want to turn into what they call a skitty, script kiddie, where you're just kind of copying and pasting commands and you're just not really knowing what's going on. You just say, I'm going to blast this box, or I'm going to throw all these things at it because this guy did it. Understand what you're doing, understand evasion, understand, different techniques like that is the best way to go about learning for cybersecurity. So in this one here, that's what we're going to be tackling for this. And just so you know, in my video series, I don't pretend to expect that you've watched all of my other videos in my series. So when I come across a concept like Nmap or ports or things of that nature, I'll explain them shortly, not entirely long. So if you're watching all of my videos, you'll probably see a repeat of that, and you're probably like, hey, he's saying the same thing over and over. Well, that's because I don't expect them, all people to be, watching all of my series in order. So I want to go ahead and make sure this is a self-contained video where any beginner can come in and learn kind of what's going on here and get a good understanding. So if you see me repeat those from previous ones, that's why. All right, without further ado, let's get popping. So TryHackMe is a great site, and again, I don't get any royalties from them or anything like that. I just prefer using this site because it's just easy to set up, and it's I buy the subscription. I think it's like $10 a month, if I'm not mistaken. It allows me to have access to all the boxes. Plus, you can run your own Kali instance as a VM in a browser, which is really cool. So I definitely recommend using these guys. There's other ones out there like the Hack the Box and things of that nature, but this is the one that I prefer, and we're going to be using this. So I started up the VM, and this is the IP address, and we kind of follow some instruction here from their little gamified instructions, but mostly we just go ahead and blast the box. Our goal is to capture two flags. One is a user flag and another one is a root flag, which means we would need to do some privilege escalation. So to do that, we first have to kind of get into the box. And ahead of time, I went ahead and ran a port scan because a lot of times the port scan will take forever, and I'm not really sure why it's not showing port 80. So I'm going to actually run this again and kind of explain what's going on with it as I run it again. But let me verify that that's the correct IP because it should be showing more than one port being open. So I'm going to run that again. So basically with Nmap, this is doing what's called scanning of ports. And if you're not familiar with ports, again, this one here is essentially the ports in a computer. It's kind of like my gateway or my access into it. There we go. And there's 65,535 ports, and they're both TCP, and there's also UDP as well, which is what they call a transport protocol. And the first 0 through 1023, because 0 is considered a number in this case, that's what they call well-known ports, and those would be things like port 22 for SSH, port 80 for an unencrypted web server, HTTP. Those are common things that are just set aside by whoever does the protocols and such. They're the ones that say, okay, listen, these are well-known ports. You do not have to type in the URL :port if you want to reach these. Now, if I decided to host my web server on a different port, like, I don't know, 5,000, let's just say, I can do that. However, I have to let whoever's going to that site know they have to type in the URL :5000. If I just keep it on the default 80, I don't have to have them do that. They just basically go to the URL, and that's where it is. Same with 443, which is the encrypted version, HTTPS. So in this case, we see we have these ports open here. Now, the 1024 on up to around, I don't know, 49,000-ish is what they call registered ports, okay? And that's where you have some software, maybe some Citrix software or something that has a specific port that it runs on. It would then register with a group called IANA to be able to register that port as being for whatever Citrix software it is, right? And then from 49,000-ish on up to 65,535, those are what they call dynamic ports, and those are the ones created by your computer. So if you're on your computer and you want to reach a web server unencrypted, that would be port 80. So the server is listening on port 80, but when you send a request, your computer creates a port or comes out of a dynamic port in the 49,000 to 65,000 whatever range. That's where it would actually do it. They call it a dynamic port, created on the fly. So that's basically what that is for there. So here we see on our server, the one that we're actually our target, we have port 22, which is SSH, and then we have port 80. Interestingly, it has this HTTP cookie flags, and HTTP only flag is not set. Now, just a sidebar, and this doesn't have to have anything to do with what we're doing here today in this exercise, but if you have cookies, which are given to have state, because HTTP in and of itself is stateless. So if I do a connect, if I say, get me this page, I connect to it, I get the page, and it's done. It disconnects. Well, let me rephrase that. If I connect to the site and I get the information, if I want to go to another page in the website, if I click a link that goes to another page, I have to re-authenticate essentially, or I have to reconnect for each single page. So if it's an authenticated page, I'll have to re-authenticate every single page I click on. And that's, obviously not going to be efficient. So they came up with this way to store session information in something they call a cookie, which would be a text file that's stored on the browser and the computer. In this case, there's attributes you can set on these cookies. So as a server, you're setting the cookie for that website, and you're saying, here's some attributes. One of the attributes is called secure. And what that means is that if I have that attribute set, that means that if the connection is not over HTTPS, it won't send the cookie. Okay, so if you're going to an HTTP site unencrypted, it will not send the cookie information because that would mean it's in clear text that everybody can kind of view, and they'll use that for session hijacking and that sort of thing. So secure ensures that if it's not over SSL, that it will not send the cookie. Another attribute is HTTP only, the one you see here. And what that means is that scripts cannot access cookie information. Now, when you do an attack, when an attacker does something called cross-site scripting, they tend to use something called JavaScript. And let's say, for instance, I wanted to know your cookie, your session cookie value, so that I can actually use that as maybe a session hijack, or maybe it's this anti-CSRF token, what have you. I'll use some JavaScript. Maybe I'll use something called document.cookie, which will then read the cookie information and display it for me. To prevent that, you can set this flag attribute, and it will basically say, no, you can't use document.cookie to access cookie information. You can't use any scripting to access it. So it kind of helps prevent or helps mitigate some XSS. So it's a great thing to set. In this case, it's not set, but it is not relevant to today's exercise. We do see all these other different things here, HTTP cookie flags and these things here. They're called scripts for Nmap. As I mentioned, Nmap does port scanning, and it has a scripting language to give it a little bit more functionality as far as being an exploit tool and all kinds of other cool things. And there's categories that they put them in. There's a default category of, it's a big slew of scripts like HTTP title, those sort of things. And there's also some dangerous ones as well. There's some vulnerability ones. There's some exploit ones. So when I'm actually running my Nmap command here, there's a dash S capital C. Now I say TAC instead of dash, so if you hear that, that's what it is. That's saying run all of the scripts in the default category, and that would be these scripts that you see here were run and found to actually produce some information. Let's take a look at the rest of the Nmap scan. The TAC-N says disable DNS resolution, and it's a way for me to kind of speed things up because I'm using an IP address and I don't really care if it resolves a DNS name for anything. The TAC-P, capital P-N, is for skipping pingin. And the reason for that is sometimes you'll come across a scan when you run your Nmap that won't give you any results. It won't say there's any ports open when there actually is, but it will basically do that because on the other end, the ICMP protocol is being disabled, right? So the server on the other side said, no, we're not going to allow ICMP, because part of the Nmap default scanning technique is to do an ARP or do a ping as well to verify that the host is alive. So we're saying, skip that step. I know the host is there. I don't really care. S-V switch would say it's a version scan. There's a text file in Nmap that actually compares and looks at different versions of software, and there's certain fingerprints and signatures for each one of those versions of software. So for example, Apache 2.4.29 for Ubuntu has a certain signature, has certain characteristics, so that when Nmap probes it and it responds in a certain way, it can look at that signature and say, oh, okay, well, I have a high degree of confidence this is Apache 2.4.29. If I omitted that switch, SV, it would just give me the port numbers and possibly also the protocols. But it wouldn't give me this extra verbose information, okay? So it's good to know that information. All right, other than that, let's get on into the business here. So we see port 80 and port 22 open. Do keep in mind this does not by default scan all 65,535 ports. It's only doing the top 1,000. So there may actually be some other ports. And on top of that, by default, unless I specify, it's only scanning TCP ports, not UDP. So if I'm looking for SNMP, for instance, this scan won't help me out. I have to do a UDP type of scan. But that's regardless. These two ports here will be sufficient. So in this particular case here, they wanted to know in your thing here what the ports are that are running on it. And then they say to run a Gobuster tool. So first, let's go ahead and check the site and see if there's anything interesting. Because if there is a website, it's always good to go ahead and look at that, look at the source of it, see if there's anything that stands out. All right, so we got a cool little graphic here, root at root me. Can you root me? Blah, blah, blah. So nothing really else there. And if we look at the page source, nothing really stands out. We see they're doing inline scripting. And let me go for a quick aside on this. This is kind of a no-no in secure coding concept, where you do not want to actually inline or put your actual scripts, your JavaScript, in the actual index page itself. What you want to do is you want to store it separately, all of your scripts in a different location other than like the web root or whatever, and then pull those in with a JavaScript or HTML called script source equals. And then you'll point to wherever that script is. That's the best way to do it. That way the bad guy doesn't, look through your scripts and understand what you're doing, because you may have some filtering or input validation routines that you've scripted with JavaScript, and they would be able to kind of understand what you're doing to try to bypass it. So it's not a good idea to put scripts inline. But other than that, there's nothing really crazy going on here, so I'm not really concerned about that. All right, so the next thing we'll do is we'll run a dir buster or a Gobuster. In this case here, there's a few different directory busting tools that we can use, but I prefer Gobuster. I find it to be quicker. So let me go ahead and type it out first, and then we'll get into the actual scan itself. But I'm going to go back to my sweet, awesome cheat sheet page on my Dratus because I've already listed out some of this here. And let's see, word list of it. Okay, that'll work there. Let's do this one. So I'm going to go ahead and use Gobuster, and I'll explain the switches as we do it, because again, we don't want to turn you into a script kiddie. You want to understand why and what we're doing here, okay? So let me just go ahead and start running it first, and I have to change a couple things. The word list is sufficient, but let me change the IP address. Let's see. Doggone it. Let me try that again. There we go. I had forgot I had to copy. So I'm going to grab the IP address here. And we'll put that HTTP // All right. So while that's running, let me explain what's going on here. So Gobuster has a few different modes that it can do. The first one is that we're going to use here today. It's called DIR. And what that basically means is there may be some other pages in your website that you may not want people to know about, or may not be obvious to anybody that exists that are there. And so it would be like your IP address /admin, or your IP address /WP-login or something like that. You may not just want those known, because then people will go to those and try to see what's on those pages. So what we can do is people have made these massive lists of common directories that a lot of websites will use, and to make it kind of speedy, it uses a tool to take that word list and insert each one of those entries after the IP address in succession, quick succession, to see if any of them respond with the 200 OK. Then that tells us that it's an actual existing directory. So DIR puts it in that mode. TACU says the URL that we're trying to get to. The TACW means the word list that we want to use. And in Kali Linux, which is what I'm using, there is a location here that has another tool called Gobuster, and they have some word lists that are fairly good. And I like to use this one in particular most of my time. So this is where you would put the path to whatever word list you're going to use. And then you hit go, and then they're off to the races. Now, Gobuster does other things where you can put extensions and things like that, but we're not worried about it today. Matter of fact, I'm going to Control-C this because I think we have what we need. So we see there's an uploads directory, which tells me there's some sort of page on this site that has a form that has an upload of some sort. So that sounds pretty awesome. /panel, that's one that's not very common. So, interesting. Let's check that out and see what's going on. So what we do is we come back here to the website, and then we add that at the end here. We append it. So /panel, and let's see what's there. All right, as we suspected, there is a select a file to upload, which is pretty awesome. So let's do this. We don't know if there's any filters. There may be filters that say, hey, you only can upload GIF. Hey, you can only upload, TXT or PDF or something like that. And there are different ways to get around that, and we're going to check to see. What we're going to intend to do, I'll give you a little precursor to it, is we're going to make something they call a reverse shell, and we're going to upload it, and we're going to hopefully see if it will store it in their uploads directory, because we do know there is an uploads directory right here. So we know it's there. And then we're going to hopefully run that backdoor shell from the uploads directory, and that will then give us terminal access to that server. That's the intent. Now, to do that, in Kali Linux, there's a variety of different web shells that are under, if you go to ls/USR/share web shell. I think it's called web shells, yeah. And we'll do like a PHP one. So if we look at this, there's a variety of different PHP shells, and PHP is a common language being used in websites. So that's the first one I would probably try. And so what we would do is we would copy this over to a location that we have to try to do it. Now, I've already created this ahead of time, and I just want to go ahead and head on over to it. And I think I already named it. There it is. So I already copied this over, and I modified it. So I copied this particular one right here over to this folder I made, and I went ahead and I renamed it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it again because I want to make sure you see what's kind of going on here. So we know it's at USR share web shells, blah, 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 PHP, and then so on and so forth. So I'm going to say CP for copy, and then we'll go ahead and put that path in there. And then I will do /, and then we'll copy this. And we're going to copy it over to /root/TryHackMe and rootme, just like that. Okay? So we can see there's the PHP reverse shell. Now, we can use a tool called Nano, which is a command line text editor, to be able to view and modify some certain things on this particular one. So if I say Nano that particular thing, we can see here if we scroll down a little bit, that this is from Pentest Monkey, and it says here we need to change this and change this. Now I'll kind of keep the port. I don't really care about that, but we do want to actually change the IP. Now in this particular case, in TryHackMe, I'm using OpenVPN to connect to it. So there's actually a tunnel address, not your ETH0 address. So if you are using TryHackMe and you are in, using a OpenVPN, your attack reverse shell address is not your ETH0 one. It will be your TUN0 address. So in this case, this would be the one. So I would copy this selection, and we'll go over here to lose track of where I'm at. There it is. So we're going to change the IP address, and we're saying that whenever if we're successfully able to upload this to the website, when we navigate to this particular shell at the website, we wanted to do a connection back to this IP address, and excuse me, in this case, giving us their access to their machine via terminal access. So I have to put some sort of return address, if you will. The port number, irrelevant in this case. We'll just keep it 1234. That's fine. Just remember that as we continue. So we're going to do a Control X and then a Y and then Enter to save it as it is. Now I'm going to rename it after I try. Well, let me rename it now. So I'll say MV, which is, it's kind of weird. It's not like Windows where it's like a rename or whatever. This one here is MV. It says move, but we can actually rename something and not really move it. We can just keep it in the same directory, but just rename it. So I'm going to say MV this file, and we're going to call it my shell 2 because I already have a my shell .php. Okay, so we'll hit enter on that. So now our reverse shell that we just created is this one right there. Okay, so let's go ahead back here to the website and let's verify and see if we can actually upload a PHP file. So we'll come back here to root and we'll go down to our TryHackMe, root me, and there is our PHP. Let's hit open and upload. All right, so I don't read whatever language this is, but I'm assuming no permitido, no permit. I'm assuming it did not like PHP. Now, to bypass, you can actually put these things into something they call Burp Suite Intruder to try a variety of different ones. But for sake of speeding things up, just know that there's always different ways to bypass filters, because what a lot of web admins do incorrectly is they actually use a blacklist, and that is not the right way to do your input validation. A blacklist says, you can't upload .php. You can't upload PDF. You can't upload docx. Everything else, good to go. What that means is, as you find there's more dangerous extensions that are being used, you have to continually keep adding it to this never-ending blacklist. Horrible way to do things. Whitelist is the best way, saying you can upload a GIF, JPEG, nothing else. Everything else is off limits. Only allow these two. That's the better way to do it. In this case, we're assuming that it's using a blacklist. And we're going to test that by trying another PHP extension, not PHP. But you can also do PHTML. You can do PHP 3, PHP 4, PHP 5. So in that particular case, I'm going to go back here and we're going to try the PHP 5. So I'm going to move again, but this time we're going to take the my shell 2. .php, and we're going to rename it to myshell2.php5. Okay, there's a variety of ones you can try, but we're going to speed things up and just try a different one that I'm putting out here. And let's go back here and let's see if they like that one better. So we're going to go back here and we see myshell2 php5. Let's open that up and upload. And it looks like green and it says success. So I'm assuming we're good to go. How do we verify? Well, if you recall, when we did our little scan here, that there is an uploads directory. So we now know where things go when they do get uploaded. So let's see if we get access to it, which we shouldn't have access to it, but in this case, purposely vulnerable. So we'll say upload. Is it upload or uploads? I think it's uploads. Yep. And here we see our myshell2 php5. Now, before we run it, we actually have to set something to kind of catch it, right? Go all Pokemon on it, catch them all, right? I don't believe I just had that Pokemon reference. I just dropped my man card out of my pocket. No, I'm just kidding. My wife used to be heavy into that Pokemon Go back when it was popular. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. Anyways, regardless. So I'm going to use a tool called Netcat, which allows me to do a connection. It's kind of the Swiss Army knife of hackers, if you will. And it allows us to create TCP connections and reverse shell connections. So I'm going to say NC for Netcat, and I'm going to say TAC LVP, and then the port 1234. Now, if you recall, when I made my reverse shell, the attack IP address was this machine, but the port number I said to listen on was 1234. So I have to be listening on port 1234 for this shell to work. So the TAC little case L that you see here, and by the way, you can combine all three of them together, but individually it would be TAC L, TAC V, TAC P. The L, little case L, says set up a listener, not persistent. So on different shutdowns and restarts, it's not persistent. If I did a capital L, it would be. V is for verbose, so I can get verbose information. And P would be for port. So I'm saying listen on 1234. So I'm going to hit enter. It's now listening, waiting for the attacker to run that PHP 5 script from the website, and hopefully we get a shell connection. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll click on this. We can see it's kind of hanging right there. Let's come back here and let's take a peek. And pop, 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 another server drop. We love it, and we're ready to rock and roll. Now, it does drop us in a particular shell, and they have something called TTY, which I've explained in some other videos and some other documentation, but it's not what they would call a stable shell in most cases, because certain commands may actually exit out of it, those sort of things. So there is something that a lot of attackers will use to kind of get around that, and it's a particular one for Python. Let's see. Here it is. So this one here is a command that allows me to go ahead and respawn a different shell that gives me a little bit more of a stable shell. And it's not entirely necessary, but in some cases you may find it is if the actual connection drops when you type in certain commands or what have you. But we'll go ahead and pop that bad boy in here like this, and we'll see if we get a different shell, and we do. And if I type in ID, I can see who I've actually broken into the machine as. Now in this case, this is the proper way to do things, because if you're running a web server, you do not want to log into the machine or start the Apache web server as a root account, because if I were to break in as an attacker, I would then also have the same privileges. I would have root privileges. And root would be kind of God mode, if you will, in Linux. In this case, they're using the www-data, and this is a very standard account. There's not really much you can do with it, so we're going to have to actually elevate our privileges. Now, on the other machine here, on the TryHackMe page, under Get in a Shell, it says find a form to upload and get a reverse shell, which we did. Find the flag, and it looks like we're looking for a user.txt. So let's go ahead and see where we're at by typing in pwd. It says print working directory. All right, so we're in the top of the file system. So when it says slash to the right, that means it's the top of the file system. And I don't see anything here for user.txt, but I do see a home. So let's go ahead and cd to home, see what we got there. All right, so we have two directories, rootme and test. So let's go ahead and check those out. See if there's anything user.txt. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use ls tac la, and what this will do is it will say list directories, but also any hidden files. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. All right, so we don't see actually any files other than the hidden ones that are normally here. So nothing really there. Let's go back again. And let's navigate to the other one, which was test. And let's see if there's anything. Okay, so there's nothing here, but we know there is a text file called user.txt, which contains our first flag. So let me teach you a command from Linux called find. I'll say find slash. That tells me, what that says is start the find search from the top of the file system. I can specify, hey, listen, do a find in the temp directory. So it would be find slash tmp. In this case, I'm just saying from the top of the file system, I want you to look everywhere for a file with the name user.txt. So we'll say dash name, and I'll go ahead and then say user, and I'm putting it in quotations as well. I'm not sure if that's actually needed or not, but I'm going to do it anyways. User.txt is what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to use dash type F, which means the type I'm looking for is a file. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a 2 bracket /dev/null. Now in Linux, the dev null was kind of like your garbage collector. It kind of goes nowhere. And the reason to do this is a lot of times when you try to do a find command, it may give a lot of verbose information, including maybe errors of things it doesn't find. Excuse me. Like maybe a 404 of some sort. So what we're saying take all the output from standard error, which would be the 2. Standard out would be 1, I think. We're saying take all the output that's error-based and throw it in the garbage. But if it's 1, which is standard out, which is legit, output, show me. So we're going to go ahead and do that, see if we can find this bad boy. I seem to have a bug in my throat for right now. All right, so we found it. It's over in var. So var is typically where the Apache web server content is. So let's go ahead and navigate over there. Or actually, let's just do this. We're going to do a cat command, which basically lets me view or display the contents of a text file in the command terminal. So we know it's over in var, and we know, whoa, I guess you can't do the tab complete on that one very well. So yeah, anyways, let's go ahead and var that and see what our flag is. And there we go. So we got our first flag. We're good there. Pop, 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 another server drop. So right there, bing, there it is. All right. So we still have another flag to go, which is a root flag. And it says here, now that we have a shell, let's escalate our privileges to root. Answer the questions below. Search for files with SUID permission. Oh, okay. So what we can do in this case here is we can say, let's do our find command again. So we'll say find slash... Oh, let's see here. I'm trying to remember the permissions, I think it's called. I think it's perm. So slash, and then we'll say dash perm. So I believe that's the correct way. Now, when they have this thing called SUID bit, essentially what it is you have these different permission level sets that are on files. In this particular case, it breaks it up into 3 categories. So in this first file I'm looking at here, this would be the owner privileges or permissions, the one that owns the actual file. In this case, it says that we have read-write privileges for that owner. The last dash could be filled with X, right? That would be execute. So read, write, and execute. The next 3 are for the groups that this particular user may be in, or what groups are allowed to open this up. In this case here, they only have read access. And then this one is the everyone else, world, whoever else, right? Anybody that's not in a group, not in a particular owner, in this case. Now, if I had a file that was running as root, okay, or let's just say test in this case, let's say I wanted somebody to be able to open this file as if they were in the permissions of test, in this case being read-write privileges. I could add another one right there called S. And what that would do is it's what they call a SUID bit. And it's essentially going to allow whoever is on the machine to run this file as if they were running under the permission of whoever owns it. Does that make sense? So in this particular case here, what we're trying to do, according to this, is we're trying to look for something that has SUID permissions. And if it's a file that's a little bit odd or not normal, that you would normally see as a SUID bit, that's the one we're trying to look for, because we're hoping whatever this weird, strange file is, that it's actually being run or owned by root. Because if we can actually run whatever that is as root, we may be able to do some privilege escalation. So the way to do this in octal format, I think that's how they call the numbered format, is you would say tac perm, and you would say 4000, and that would indicate SUID bit. Okay. Now I can again do my bracket /dev/null so that I don't get a bunch of error information, error messages. I can go ahead and do that. And actually, let's also go ahead and do the type file. So we're going to say tac type F, and we'll do 2 bracket slash dev slash null, if I can type. All right, let's see what we can find with this bad boy. It's going to look through, and I obviously typed something in wrong. So let me go back to my sweet cheat sheet, because I'm probably obviously doing something incorrect for that. Let's see if I have one for SUID. I think I do, somewhere in here. Privilege escalation. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do tac type? I did that correct, right? All right, let's do this. Let me copy this. There may be something that I mistype. Doesn't look like it is, but we'll do it again. Okay, something went weird. Anyways, apparently I type F. Huh, that's strange. So it looks like I didn't do anything different, but for some reason it didn't work the first time. Anyways, regardless, let's take a look here. What this means is that all of these here actually have SUID bit set. Most of these are pretty common, like this one and this one and this one. Nothing really strange there. Although, this is a little strange. User bin Python is a little strange, because that's not normally what we would see there. Ping, SU, PPD. Yeah, all these look normal, and you would know normal by doing this a lot, and you would be able to see, okay, these are normally what I see show up. But what I don't normally see it show up is this Python one. So what we can do is we can verify this if it is using SUID bit. So let's do an ls tac-l for that path. All right, so it looks like it is being owned and run by root, and right here is the one I was talking about. See where it says RWS instead of RWX? The S in this case indicates the SUID bit. It's basically saying anybody on this machine now can run Python from this location as if they were root. That's pretty awesome. So what we can do with this is we can use a privilege escalation script from a site called GTFO bins. Now in this case, we'll go ahead and type in Python to see if there's anything that we can use. Look at that. There we go. SUID. Bing. All right. So it's here, if the binary has the SUID bit set, it does not drop the elevated privileges and may be abused to access the file system, escalate, or maintain privileged access as a SUID backdoor. All right. Now, a lot of times we'll go through these in full detail because a lot of times there's something that's interesting about these. But in this case here, let's go ahead and see what they have. So it says that if we run this, now this we don't actually have to do because it already has the binary on it. So we don't have to worry about that. That's if it didn't have the binary on it. But we already know it is there. So Python, we'll have to kind of precede this with USR bin because that's where it's at on the machine. So taxi import OS, this would be basically saying we're running a command called import OS, and it's going to drop the bin sh, which is a variant or precursor, I guess, to bash shell. I'm assuming the TAC-P would be for the privilege escalation. All right, so let's go ahead and copy this right there, and we'll come back here. Now, we know that the actual Python from the victim is in this location here. So let's go ahead and type that in, /usr/bin, and then I'll go ahead and pop in the rest of that command. All right, so it looks like it gave us another prompt. Let's do an ID this time. Bingo! Right there, look at that. Root privileges. Loving it. Pop, pop, pop. Another server drop. So we now know we have some root privileges here. So let's go ahead and CD over to root. And I bet we have a flag there. Let's take a look. Look at that. Cat root.txt. Bada bing, bada boom. And we popped it. So in this particular case, this is kind of what this whole privilege escalation using SUID is all about. Now, if you were to review or do anything here for Python and understand the tac-c being the commands, what you can do, I'm going to open up another terminal here. As you can say, man Python, and it will give you a help file so you can kind of go down through so you don't, like I said, we don't want you to turn it into a script kiddie. So you want to kind of see what are these commands that are from GTFO bins mean. So in this case, we see the taxi listed here. It is a command. So specify the command that you do want to execute. And in this case, it's saying, where is it at? Where are we at? Here it is. So in this case, we're seeing the taxi. It says to run this command, import OS, meaning import a library into the Python, from the Python library of OS. And then from here, os.excel, or ex for execute. I'm not sure what the L means. But in this case, we have the bin/sh, and that's another version of another shell that we're running. So we're basically saying that if we ran this as if they were root, then the shell that we're going to get would have root privileges. That's the reason it worked the way it did, is because the actual owner of running Python in this case was root. And because we had the ability to do that, that's what we have. So the -p, let's see what that's all about. So we'll go down through our man page, and a lot of times these are case sensitive, like you have a little case S and big case S. So we're looking for a little case P in this case. So let's go down through. And it maybe is part of the actual OS, the Python command itself, but I don't actually see the -p. Let's see here. Nope, I don't actually see that listed. Let's go ahead and queue out of that. Let's go back here for a second. Oh, okay, here we go. If it is used to run sh-p, omit the -p argument on systems like Debian that allow the default shell. Okay, so it looks like it's saying run it with the permissions. I guess that's what the -p is for. It's saying run it with the permissions of SUID in this particular case. But I kept it in, even though we are on a Debian-based machine, which is Kali. But I guess it's just double dipping essentially. But anyways, regardless. Yeah, okay, cool. So that's kind of why we got privilege escalation. Again, because we're actually saying that we want the shell to be spawned. And the way we're spawning it is by running it from a Python command, which in turn is being run and owned by root, meaning the shell being spawned will be root. That's the intent of why we did this particular elevation. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff going on here on the TryHackMe, on RootMe. So we learned a few different things like upload vulnerabilities and such, because you can do a variety of different bypasses for uploads if you research a bunch of different ones that you have. The one we did today was we just renamed the extension, but there's some other different crafty ways you can get about it. So we learned a little bit about that. We learned a little bit about directory busting by adding different paths in for the extension. And then from there, we learned some privilege escalation about with what's called SUID bit. And there's a variety of other ones. Now, something else that we could have done if we didn't use TryHackMe's little hint here about searching for files with SUID permission is we could have used a script called linpeas.sh, and that would have essentially found that same exact vulnerability. So if you actually have the linpeas script and you can put it onto the server itself, then you can actually go ahead and run it, and it would find essentially the same thing. It would do a search for any file with SUID bit. But it's an automated way to see if there's anything that we can use for privilege escalation on a Linux machine. There's another version of it called WinPeas for the Windows, which is another way to do some more privilege escalation with that. So I hope you enjoyed that video. We're going to be doing some more videos in that series, and if you are interested, go check out the YouTube channel. We have another video series called Bounty Hunter Training, and that focuses on web application hacking concepts so that you can use it in bounty hunting or bug bounty that you're doing possibly for some money, quick money. Then we have another video series called Don't Be a Tool, where I go over some common tools like Burp Suite and Nmap and things of that nature, and we talk about it, discuss it, do some examples of it. So those are some different series that I've come up with so far. And there's an essentials video series that has some essential things as well, like how to set up VMs and some basics of Linux, those sort of things. So please go ahead and check out the rest of the videos I have there. And if you do dig it, go ahead and click on subscribe and click on the notification bell to be notified when I put out more content. I try to do 1 or 2 a week, and I'm also going to try to do some live stream ones as well. So Hopefully you enjoyed today's lesson, and pop, 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 another server drop. So until next time, peace out, players.